and chapter 4, which is good. We're going pretty good pace. We do need to go a tiny bit quicker, just for a little bit, but not bad. When we get to chapter 5, we'll go fast. And I think after 5, I may skip and go to 10. But we'll play that bridge when we come. Okay, chapter 4, section 5. Title it inside of your journal, Radical Equations. Okay. An example of a radical equation is this. Okay, this is a very, very, very basic one right here. In order to do a radical equation, hopefully everyone's listening, you have to get the radical alone. So whatever's with the radical, you got to move it to the other side. So for example, if I had like a 2 times the square root, you'd have to divide both sides by 2. If I had the square root of w plus 8 and then outside of the radical like plus 1, you would have to subtract the 1 over. The goal is you have to get the radical alone first. Okay, because as soon as you can get the radical alone, you then are just going to square both sides, which in turn gets rid of the radical, and then you can just solve for the variable, which everyone here should be pretty comfortable solving for a variable by now. Which you get w equals 17. Okay, so the key thing about radical equations is to get the radical alone, and you do everything in your power to get the radical alone. Alright, so for example, if I had 5y minus 21 plus 1 equals 4, the first thing you have to do, the radical is not alone. Does everyone see that? You have to get rid of this plus 1, so we're going to subtract 1 first to get the square root of 5y minus 21 equals 3. And then as soon as the radical is alone, then you can square both sides. So we're going to square both sides, which then gives us 5y minus 21 equals 9. And then everyone should know how to solve this to be able to get y equals 6 as your solution.
So, whatever's in the square root is just half of what it looks like?
Not half, because if it's just the same. So after you square both sides, all you're doing is just removing the square root like that. So it still becomes 5y minus 21. The only difference is over here it becomes 9.
Yeah, so when you square it, it's like...
Okay, try this one on your own here. So if we have the square root of 2w minus 13 minus 1 equals negative 2. Try that one on your own real quick. I need to write bigger. 2w minus 13, tw minus 13 plus 1, yeah.
Is that a negative 2?
Yeah. Ethan Raditz, what did you do first? Good, so we have to add 1. Why did you add 1 first? Okay, now what did you do, Ethan? Okay, what's the square root of negative 1? I mean the square root of negative 1. Okay, so this negative 1 squared is just 1. And then we can add 13 to both sides. We get 2w equals 14. Or w equals 7. Who got that right? Raise your hand. Good. Okay. That's when you're solving them using basic algebra. Okay? Add, subtract, square, square root. Now we're going to solve them in Math 2 world. So if we have x equals the square root of 8x minus 7. So do it with me real quick. Okay. First thing you have to identify is the square root alone. Yep, and we don't have to move anything, everything is good right now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to square both sides. Because we have to get rid of the square root in order to solve it. Which is going to leave us x squared equals 8x minus 7. Okay, how do I solve this? Other than Andy. Okay, I like it. Why would you want to add 7? Okay, you're starting there. What? You're nope. Why do we want to? Why would we want to add 7? Why would we want to? Someone else other than Andy has to know this. How do we solve this? Steve, what? You have to set it equal to 0. Listen, I've told you guys 1,000 times this year. Why do I have to, Andy, you can answer this. Why do I have to set it equal to 0? Because it's an x squared and it's a quadratic. So look, if we set it equal to 0, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So the first thing you have to do is always, anytime you have an x squared, you need to get it set equal to 0, unless you're going to try to complete the square, which you could do on this one, but I would not encourage it. I still would factor this, but we're going to do this 3 different ways right now. You guys ready? Because actually, we've taught you, I think I've taught you 4 different ways. We could factor it, graph it, quadratic formula, and complete the square. We could do vertex form. So watch, here we go. So here's your problem. I'm going to turn it over. This is going to be your review for the day, so everyone pay attention. X squared minus 8x plus 7 equals 0. So does everyone understand why we have to get a set equal to 0? You're going to only have to solve it one time, but these are going to get a little bit tougher. But I'm going to show you the different ways you can solve it. Did I have plus 7 or minus 7? It's plus. Okay, the first way, I'm going to factor it. So factor is going to look like this. X squared minus 8x plus 7 equals 0. The way you factor is you have to find 2 numbers that multiply together to be C and add together to be B. What are they? -7, -1. Okay, those numbers, because A is 1, get plugged right into your FOIL parentheses, and you can solve them by setting them both equal to 0. So x equals 7, x equals 1. That's the first way we know how to do it. Factor. We've learned that. Next way, we'll do quadratic formula. Ready? So it's a positive 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. So 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 28 is 36 over 2. 8 plus or minus 6 over 2. 8 plus 6 is 14 divided by 2 is 7. 8 minus 6 is 2 divided by 2 is 1. There's another way. Did we get the same answer? Okay, let's go complete the square. This is the one we did last chapter. So, what are you going to say? Yeah, you can do any of them. That's the greatest thing about quadratics. I taught you 4 or 5 different ways to be able to solve them. X squared minus 8x plus 7 equals 0. If you complete the square, you got to get it x squared and x together. Take 1/2 of this, square it, which gives us 16. And then we're going to add that to both sides. So x minus 4 squared equals 9. You square both sides. X minus 4 equals plus or minus. What's the square root of 9?
3.
So x equals 4 plus or minus 3. So x equals 7. X equals 1. There's, oh, look at that. 7 and 1. 7 and 1. 7 and 1. Should we do one more right here?
Yeah.
let's go graph. Okay, we'll just do graph. Here we go.
Can you go up a bit? Wait, are we supposed to write all this down?
No, I'm just showing you. Look, I'm just showing you all the different ways. Now, one of them, if you guys look at this problem, one of them is significantly easier than the others.
The one clear to the left, the factor.
Factoring took me 10 seconds. The rest are taken,
At least 3.
can take you 2 to 3 minutes, right? It just varies. This one could take you 30 seconds. These ones take you 2 to 3 minutes. Graphing's one I definitely would not choose unless they ask you to. You can do it. I'm actually going to graph by converting it to vertex form. So look, vertex form is, it's actually really close, but vertex form we could factor a 1 out, which leaves, we're going to, here, just for kicks. Oh, sorry, just for kicks.
Just do the easy way.
Okay, hey, Tyson, you want Daxton's punishment? You can raise your hand if you have a question. What? I will in a second. Okay, so here's your formula. X squared minus 8x plus 7 equals 0. I'm going to graph it by going x equals negative b over 2a, which is 8 over 2 times 1, which is 4. When you plug 4 back in, this is going to be huge, actually. This is 16 minus 32 plus 7, or negative 9, is that right? So your vertex is 4, negative 9, which you actually can tell from here. Okay? So your vertex is going to be 4, negative 9. Ready, guys? Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 4, negative 9. If x squared is 1, we're going to go up 1 over 1. Up 3 over 1. And then if you actually did it again, it'd be up 5 over 1. But we haven't taught you the shortcut to the third step, which doesn't matter. Which your parabola looks like this. Everyone needs to stay quiet now. Your parabola then intersects at 1 and 7, which is also your answers. 4 different ways to solve a quadratic.
We don't know that shortcut. Can we just not?
You don't need to graph it. You could always just do one of these.
We could factor which is
Okay? Hey, so there's 4 different ways you've learned how to solve a quadratic by the time we've even hit Christmas break. I don't think we'll learn another. Because there's 4 different, so every single, this is a really great question. Tyson, you got 20 extra with Daxton, so do you, Hans. All right, you're good. I didn't think you did. I'm just making sure Tyson did. Tyson was giggling and showing off stuff. Here we go. And he didn't have his mask on. Okay, listen. The reason why you have 4 different ways, there is a reason. The reason is because every single quadratic can be solved easier with different types of problems. So there's 4 different ways to solve them. Sometimes it's factoring. Factoring is easier. Like looking at that problem right off the bat, I knew I was going to use factoring. Right? Because you can see stuff. I know that I have C and I have B. Anytime A is 1, I look to factor first. Because it's easy. All you're doing is plugging them into your FOIL parentheses, setting them equal to 0, and you're done. If A is not equal to 1, I look at completing the square or the quadratic formula. The only time I ever graph to solve is if they ask me to. Now, there is times where you do have to graph, where they ask you to, but normally, majority of the time, I look to factor first. Factoring saves you massive amounts of time in the long run. Now, can you use all the other methods? Yeah, you can use all the other methods, right? I just showed you all 4 of them got the exact same answer. It doesn't matter. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't care which method you use unless they ask you to use a certain method. But, I mean, Andy, which one do you like to do more? Factoring's easier. Does anyone else like a different? I assume a lot of you guys already like the quadratic formula because you have it memorized. You can plug stuff in. The hard thing about, like, I will complete the square. I will go, my order is I go factor, and then I complete the square, then I do the quadratic formula. So if I can't factor, and if B is not positive, then I do the quadratic formula. If B is not even. If B is even, I knock out the quadratic formula. That makes it easy. If B is not even, then I do the quadratic formula. But And as you go farther along in math, especially in Math 3, you do a lot more of this stuff. You'll do it. I like I said, I will factor 100 times out of 100, and then I'll complete the square, and then I'll do the quadratic formula. So, but yeah, we've learned all. In fact, I think completing the square we spent 3 days on. Graphing we spent an entire chapter on. Factoring we spent 1/6, 1/7, 1/8, and 1/9 on. And quadratic formula we probably spent a week on. So, I mean, when you talk about the number of weight, we've spent a month just talking about how to solve quadratics, which is crazy if you think about it. Okay, Tyson. No. Here we go. More. V equals the square root of. You guys got to buckle in. We still got. This is another easy one, and then we're going to go to a harder one. Okay. Okay. First things first. What do I have to do? Okay, radicals by itself, we're going to square both sides. So now we have v squared. As soon as you see a v squared or a variable squared, you should be thinking to set it equal to 0 unless you wanted to try to complete the square. Now this one right here, I absolutely never would complete the square, yeah.
Wouldn't it just be like, if you see v by itself at the start, you're just like, oh yeah, I'm going to that.
Yeah, I like that. I like this. If this is ever if a is ever 1 out here, I look to factor immediately. Okay, but sometimes it won't work, right? Because sometimes you can't find two numbers that multiply together to be c and add together to be v. Then you have to go to your other methods. Now this one right here, I can already tell you I'm going to be able to factor it. Because the first thing we're going to do is get it set equal to 0 by subtracting 7v and adding 6. Because now I could say, okay, what are two numbers that multiply together to be c and add together to be b? Negative 6, negative 1. Right? Because those two numbers, they multiply together to be 6, and they add together to be negative 7. So if that's the case, I can then plug them into my FOIL parentheses and solve them, which gives us v equals 6 and v equals 1 is our solution. Sorry. I think it's kind of glitching. Here we go. Okay. Now, remember though, if you can't remember how to factor, you don't need to panic, right? I showed you could use the quadratic formula and still solve it. Right? If you guys, I assume most of you guys are more comfortable probably with quadratic. You'll get to the point where you'll never use you will do everything possible not to use the quadratic formula. Because it just takes, it takes twice as long sometimes as other problems. But I like factoring. Okay, but let's get a little bit tougher here. If we have a problem like this, the square root of 43 minus 2v, I don't know why I made my root so big, equals v minus 4. Okay, what do we have to do first? We got to get rid of the radical. Something happens to our right-hand side over there. Kate Ballard, what am I going to have to do right here? Huh? We don't want to do that. That's how puppies die. That's what Mrs. Yates has on her wall. If you have v minus 4 squared and you do this, that's how puppies die. That's legitimately what she has on her wall. Okay, because that's not right. Max, say louder. You're supposed to foil it. Yes, because it's v minus 4 squared, that is v minus 4 times v minus 4. So everyone go through, take 20 seconds and foil that. Yeah. Thank you. I think we're going to be able to factor, yeah?
8 or 5.
That's an 8. V squared minus 8v plus 16 when you factor it. Okay, so hopefully everyone knows I'm not going to teach you again how to factor. And if we don't know how to factor by now, we're in a dark place. Okay. Alright, so now we're into this weird formula right there. So now we have to do what we did on the previous one. We have to get a set equal to 0. So let's do it. We're going to subtract 43 to both sides, put it underneath its like term, and add 2v to both sides and put it underneath its like term, which is going to give us v squared minus 6v minus 27 equals 0. Nice, we can factor this one. Okay? So all I did is I got it set equal to 0. I brought the 43 over, and I brought the 2v over. So I added 2v because it's negative, and I subtracted 43 because it was positive over here. And you put them underneath your like terms. I would never make my squared positive. I'd never make my squared negative.
Yeah.
Okay, you can do it with a negative. It just makes it a lot harder of a problem. So a lot of times people see this problem, they try to bring the squared over to here. Never. My squared will be positive. Okay, partly I've only shown you how to do a couple, which means no one remembers how. You'd have to factor out the negative and then you have to move it. It's a nightmare. Okay, we don't do that. Our squared is positive. Understand? So keep your squared positive. Okay, we're to here. Two numbers that multiply together to be negative 27 and add together to be negative 6. Okay, so remember, if you can't think of them, you could always just say, well, this area is over here a testing area, so you could figure out any two numbers that multiply together to be at, plug them in, see if it works. Remember, they have to multiply together to be C and add together to be B. Now, could you use the quadratic formula? Yes. Do I want you to? Absolutely not. Okay? So, what do we got? 96. I don't see a 96. Okay, so our two answers are going to be 9 and negative 3. We're going to do one more of these harder ones. Okay, I want it dead silent here, no talking. I'm going to walk through one start to finish. Okay, don't write it down. Unless you want to come in and, hey, guess what we're doing? We're solving radical equations using factoring. Radical.
Awesome. That's so rad.
Huh?
I think he knows how to do it.
No. Maybe.
Definitely.
You know how to do this?
I know how to do all rad stuff.
Yeah.
I'm basically
I like
rad.
piano.
He's the real deal.
It's true.
We're solving radical equations with factoring. It's
I
fun.
don't want to interrupt that anymore. I just want to say hi.
Hello.
Thank you.
Okay. Shh. No talking. Hey. No talking. Everyone check in. Don't even write it down. I want you to watch. That's it. Okay. Pencils down. You're watching only. Here we go. So if we have the square root, stop, of negative 2v plus 20 equals v plus 2. The first thing I'm going to do is the radical alone it is, so I'm going to square both sides, which is going to give us negative 2v plus 20 equals. Because it's v plus 2 squared, I have to FOIL it, which is going to give us v squared plus 4v plus 4 after you FOIL. Okay? Then you have to get it set equal to 0. Anytime you have a squared, you got to get it set equal to 0. So we're going to add 2v to both sides and subtract 20 to both sides. Remember, when you do this part, you have to get it underneath your like terms. So that's going to leave us with v squared plus 6v minus 16 equals 0. Okay, this part's pretty easy. Let me do it. Now I'm going to look to factor. Remember, if you don't know how to factor, you can't remember, you can use the quadratic formula. I always check factoring first. Usually when you get farther along in math, you'll be able to do a lot of this in your head. We'll better see. I know that this one's going to factor. I know my two numbers are 8 and negative 2. They multiply together to be negative 16. They add together to be positive 6. So I can come down here and go v plus 8. V minus 2 equals 0. At this point, we can then set them both equal to 0. And we get our two solutions as v equals negative 8 and v equals 2. Okay, questions? Sam?
Where did the 2 go?
Which one?
The one on the top.
This?
Yeah.
When you square them, v squared plus 2v plus 2v plus 4. That's where it went. Okay, other questions? Okay, today you're going to be asked to do all kinds of different radical equations. Some of you will have to do more than others. Okay? You could be dead silent the rest of the hour. If Daxton's already doing it, if you're quiet the rest of the hour, I'll sign it at the end if you're not. But you can't talk unless you have a question to me. Daxton, deal or no deal? Okay, here we go. I'm going to give, but you guys all do get 10 extra, so. And that doesn't work like that. You are going to have 3.
Now I have 13.
We have 13. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Now, let me get your title. The title's 4-5. It should delete it right now. Did it? Refresh your computer. Did it?
Will you put 4-2 as 100 in mine?
Come up, show me.
Okay.
You won't have time to finish your homework if we do. What do you want to do? 4-2 part 2. I mean 4-5. Let me see which one.
4-2, I believe.
Carson, bring me up those quizzes real quick, will ya? I'm going to be putting your quizzes, then I can come around and help you. Tell me you guys don't use my graph paper for quizzes. Do it again. You get a 0 on a quiz. I know, that's why I'm giving you the warning now.
Wait, that's what you had over there.
You think I care? Okay. Allie, do me a favor. Go to the library and get me 2 reams of paper. So does she. Thank you, Allie. You guys, it's still recording. They're going to be pissed.
Oh, it's still recording.